Why vultures might just be the smartest birds above the block. The birds are widely reviled for their carrion-eating ways. But an evolutionary history of scavenging has forged a creative, cunning and wide-ranging mind. The two light-faced vultures had been together for just a few months, yet the massive birds, with their watchful, featherless gargoyle faces and their dark mottled body plumage so plush it looks like fur, had already mastered the avian version of monkey see monkey do. Kenya, the female vulture, hopped onto a tree stump in the middle of their outdoor enclosure at the Maryland Zoo. Shredder, the male vulture, hopped onto another stump nearby. Kenya jumped back to the ground. Shredder waited a beat and did likewise. He lumbered over to a corner of the enclosure and spread his wings wide to their nearly 7-foot span, exposing fluffy white feathers that covered his legs like a pair of bloomers. Kenya positioned herself a few inches behind him and added novelty to the mimicry, unfolding first one wing, then half of the other, then the second half. Ta-da! It's called mirroring behavior, Jen Kotyan, the zoo's bird curator, said, and it was a promising sign. Light-faced vultures, native to Africa and named for the flaps of skin, or lappets, that dangle from either side of their head, are among the world's most endangered birds. In 1991, the Maryland Zoo became one of the first in the United States to successfully breed the vultures in captivity, and Ms. Kotyan predicted that the newly installed pair, now 2.5 years old, would prove similarly obliging. They're doing really well, and they seem to get along, she said. So we're hoping things will go easy when they hit sexual maturity in another 3 or 4 years. Brandon Jones, an animal keeper who worked closely with the vultures, threw the birds a piece of raw meat. They ripped it apart and swapped pieces of it back and forth. I think she's a little smarter than he is, Mr. Jones said. All vultures are smart, Miss Kotyan said. I haven't met a vulture that wasn't. Masters of innovation. To the general public, vultures may seem vaguely repulsive, Edward Gorey-type characters that skulk in bare trees waiting for something to die. But to researchers who study any of the 23 species in today's vulture consortium, the birds brim with intelligence born of their exceptional vocation. Many animals feed on carrion opportunistically, when the occasion arises. Alone among vertebrates, vultures have taken scavenging professional. In lieu of hunting live prey, they seek out dead meat. That may seem easy, after all, everything dies. But because the time and place of an animal's death are rarely predictable, the vulture's reliance on carrion has forged, along with a flexible neck for poking into corpses and a featherless head for easy self-cleaning, a creative, cunning and wide-ranging mind. It makes sense that an animal that depends on scarce resources can really benefit from being intelligent, said Thys van Overvelde, a vulture researcher at the Donana Biological Station in Seville, Spain. Vultures, their fans insist, rival the famously brainy parrots and corvids in the use of tools and artful maneuvers to secure their needs and desires. Egyptian vultures, for example, have been shown to throw stones at ostrich eggs to crack through the shell, but only after an experimenter revealed to the birds that the giant eggs contained food. Egyptian vultures have also been observed wielding twigs to rake up tufts of wool from sheep shearing pens and repurposing the wool as nest insulation. The vultures are vain about their appearance and during breeding season will use makeup. They roll around in mud to paint their body feathers red and eat herbivore dung to extract the carotenoid pigments that will turn their white faces gold. Black vultures in Northern California have learned to play midwife to sea lions, snipping the umbilical cords of newborn pups and then feeding on the placenta. To explore problem solving in turkey vultures, researchers applied the classic string pulling test. They dangled chunks of quail and chicken meat from 24-inch nylon strings attached to a wooden platform and then challenged a half-dozen vultures to step onto the beam and try to retrieve the hanging prizes. In previous trials with ravens and parrots, successful birds relied on foot power, pulling up a bit of string with their bill, tucking it under a talon, and then pulling up more. But the flat, webbed feet of the turkey vultures proved ill-equipped for grasping, so 3 of the cannier vultures took a different tack. They sucked up the nylon thread like a strand of spaghetti and then appeared to stash it in the throat crop that serves as their all-purpose food storage device until at last they could seize the meat and expel the string. Vultures are masters of innovation when it comes to scrounging for food, Dr. Van Overvelde said. In a 2021 paper in Animal Cognition, he described vultures as an overlooked model in cognitive ecology. In search of uplift. Also impressive is what might be called the vulture's wide-angle intelligence, the way it scouts for scarce and fleeting resources across vast panoramas of land and sky. Researchers who track the bird's movements with satellite transmitters have been astonished to see just how far vultures fly, sometimes nearly 20,000 miles per year. They educate you about the landscape, said Corinne Kendall, a vulture expert and conservationist at the North Carolina Zoo in Asheboro, NC. By making these big movements all the time, they show you where connectivity might exist between one place and another. Airborne vultures seek not only carrion but also the next source of uplift. Many vultures are big birds. The king vulture of Central and South America, for example, its head and neck so brilliantly festooned with patches of red, blue, yellow, purple and orange that some consider it the reigning beauty of vultures, can weigh 10 pounds or more, whereas an average American crow is 21 ounces. Vultures need the bulk to help weather carrion scarcity, but their heaviness makes active flying, with wings flapping, especially costly. Vultures have addressed the contradictory demands by becoming some of the world's finest gliders. They stay aloft for hours on breezes and thermals, columns of hot rising air, and as one thermal degrades, vultures move on to the next. Emily Shepherd of Swansea University in Britain and her colleagues studied flight performance in Andean condors, which at an average of 24 pounds are among the most massive soaring birds in the world. The scientists learned that the costs of gliding for condors were extremely low, barely twice the caloric expense of resting on the ground. Flapping, by contrast, burned about 30 times more energy than doing nothing. For a bird as big as a condor, flapping is really like a sprint, Dr. Shepherd said, and condors in flight do it just 1% of the time, a far lower flapping rate than is seen in other long-distance gliders like albatrosses and shearwaters. Vultures may find fresh thermal columns by watching cloud patterns, revisiting reliable updraft hotspots and, above all, by spying on other birds, tuning into a kind of aerial vase, just as any glider pilot will tell you. If you see birds circling, that's where you fly next, Dr. Shepherd said. To scan widely, vultures rise high, climbing 10,000 feet or more into the air. With eyesight as sharp as that of an eagle or falcon, vultures can detect tiny variations in the landscape that might signal current or soon-to-be carrion, like displacements in the grass as a predator disembowels its prey. Some vultures add a keen sense of smell to their surveillance. A high-flying turkey vulture can detect a single odor molecule wafting up from old meat. Turkey vultures probably have the best sense of smell of any animal that's ever existed, Dr. Kendall said. When vultures spot a potential meal, they drop earthward at dizzying speed, plunging thousands of feet in a matter of seconds. They sound like little rocket ships when they land, Dr. Kendall said. They attack a carcass vigorously, different species stepping in as their skill set and brazenness permit. If a wildebeest dies in Tanzania, for example, large-billed behemoths like light-faced vultures or white-headed vultures will make the first pass, tearing into the tough hide and exposing the cavity, followed by mid-size white-backed vultures that crowd in for their share of flesh, fat and viscera. Finally, smaller hooded vultures will go for the bones. After an hour or two, the remains of the 450-pound herbivore won't be enough to stock soup. Predators eat just 30% of available meat. Vultures take care of the rest. It's such an industrious and well-layered system of clearing away carcasses, said Aaron Nicholas, a vulture conservationist with the Wildlife Conservation Society. There's nothing to compare with it. The sanitation benefits run deep. Vultures reduce the greenhouse gases that decomposing corpses emit and remove from the environment a host of potentially pestilent microorganisms found in rotting meat. The bacteria behind anthrax, tetanus or botulism. A vulture's idea of spices. New research suggests that vultures have evolved an array of defenses to counter pathogens and bacterial toxins that would sicken or kill other animals. Not only are their stomachs famously acidic, but the vulture microbiome, the set of microbial communities that populate the bird's gastrointestinal tract, throat, face and other body parts, clearly plays a protective role. 2. In preliminary assays of vulture fluids and tissue samples, researchers have identified beneficial microbes that block Yersinia pestis, the bearer of plague, and Listeria, the cause of food poisoning. They have found an army of phages, viruses that can attack patho